I'm going to fly today from Ray Bergman's book Trout. This is called the Indian Yellow. Calls for some very pale ginger hackles and a very light yellow rib as well as light brown floss body. Pretty straightforward wet fly pattern. This one turned out pretty nice with one exception, that my head, as I was putting the black lacquer on, unfortunately, sometimes these hackles, you just barely touch them with this lacquer. And I don't know if it's something in the lacquer itself, but the hackle seems to kind of suck it up. So I've got one spot over here where maybe I was just putting too much lacquer on or something. I'm not certain. I may have to experiment with looking for a different lacquer. Either way, that is the Indian Yellow, and I'll get started tying. I'm going to start the Indian Yellow with my hook on the vise, and this is a Mustad 3399 in a size 4. No, I'm sorry, this is in a size 6. I'm going to debarb the hook, and I'm going to start with white thread. I'm using a Danville's 6/0 in white for the under the body because it is a light brown floss body. I don't want to darken it up with black thread, so I'm going to start with the white. I'm going to put a little wax on my thread just to give me a little bit better grip, and I'm going to start my thread just at the end of the body and then advance that down to just about the point of the hook. There is no tag on this, but there is a tail. The tail and the hackle on the Indian Yellow is a light, and the recipe says a very, very light ginger. About the lightest that I have is this hen neck right here. Just got a little bit of ginger in it. I don't know if the camera can pick all that up. The thing is, when you tie it in, I'm going to use one of the larger feathers here for the tail. When you tie it in, it almost looks just white. So I suppose if you don't have any light or very, very light ginger, just go ahead and go with some white and you'll be fishing just fine. So I'm going to measure that a shank length long. I'm going to bring that back in, tie that in, and then keep advancing my thread down the hook shank to the end of the shank. I'm going to trim this back a little bit so it tapers when I tie that in. The body for the Indian Yellow is a very light brown floss. The lightest that I've got is this Danville 4-strand here that's called a coffee color. And the rib is actually a very pale yellow rib, and this Tego fly floss that I have here, a little shinier than I care for, but it's the only very pale yellow that I've got. And I'm going to double that up when I tie that in, so it's just a little bit thicker. Wrap a couple more wraps down the hook shank, and then I'm going to tie in the brown floss for the body. And at this point, when I tie this in, I will be working my thread forward. I want to have that the length of the body. And now I'll start working my thread forward. Put a little bit more wax on my thread. Just helps me to grip the material a little bit better. It doesn't slide, the thread won't slide around on the material as much. I want to try and get nice touching turns of thread on here so that I have a fairly smooth underbody. Stop with my thread right up in the headspace there. Now I can apply the brown floss for the body and then the pale yellow floss for the rib. Twisted my body off to the side just a little bit, and that tail kind of got moved. Just kind of show you that you can still modify some things when you're tying these flies. So I can actually pinch hard and twist that body and twist it back onto the hook shank a little bit to get that tail back up there. Sometimes you can't, it's just locked in that way. With my rib in, I will bring my thread to just behind the eye of the hook. I'm going to change over to my black thread. I'm using a Danville 6/0 in black. Already put some wax on this thread. And I shall tie in the wing. The wing on the Indian yellow is I'm using a mottled turkey wing. I'm going to get 2 slips. These are a little wider than what I want, which is fine, because I'll match those up. I mostly want the tips to be matched up here, like this. And then as you can see, the one on my side is a little bit wider. So I can take some off the top and the bottom, or just one side. I think just one side on this one is fine. Keep those tips evened up there. I think one fiber is all I need to get out. The overall wing might be a little bit wider. I usually go a little bit less than a gap width of the hook. I'll probably call out a couple on both sides to narrow that wing up just a little bit. You're going to tie that in with the tip about halfway down the tail. I'm going to use a technique here that Don Bastian promoted. I'm going to pinch and loop this around the other side. Now my left hand is pinching the hook, the wing, and the thread on both sides, while that thread, so the thread now is not pulling down on the wing here. You can, at this point, pull that down, but sometimes the wing doesn't get pushed down nice and even. It folds over. What you can do is grab this section here, we're going to cut away a minute, with your right hand, ease up. Now the thread is just hanging on that wing. and I can brace the back part of the wing with my left hand and just push down and let the thread start pulling those fibers down to the hook shank, and then finish pulling those down. Get in a wrap or two to take a look. My wing ended up a little bit short, and I think because mostly I was explaining all the steps of what I was doing and not as focused on just doing them. We'll give that another try here. See, even right here, it kind of folded some of these, the top and the bottom. I think it's just fine. The hackle on here is going to cover that up, but sometimes it folds it enough the wing just doesn't quite set right. But again, I think for fishing purposes, this will be fine. I'm going to clean up the head here, head space a little bit, coming back on the hook shank a little bit for my hackle. The hackle is just the same light ginger hen hackle that I'm going to use. I'm going to pick a feather out that has the softer parts, barbs right down here, that are just about the length of the head back to the point of the hook. I'm going to trim that back so I have just a small nub on the end of that rachis to tie in. And I will tie that in and anchor that down to the head space and move my thread down to the eye of the hook. My hackle pliers, I'm going to put in 3 to 4 wraps of this hackle. I want the wraps to go right in front of each other, kind of covering up the under part of that black head. The 4th wrap I'll bring right up to the side, wrap my thread over it. Keeping tension on my thread, I slide all of this back and start putting thread wraps in to form the head of the fly. What this does is it cleans it all up, and it also wedges those barbs in the hackle in a rear position so they're swept back more. They don't stick out perpendicular as much. With keeping tension on my thread there, I now can take the end of that feather, just pop that off. I will flatten my thread out here and put in a 7 or 8 turn whip finish. The whip finish kind of jumped on me there, and the head kind of got messed up because of it. So I'm just going to wrap that down a little bit more and put on another whip finish. A lot of times, especially if it's a fishing fly, you don't have to be that concerned. Also, if you're putting black lacquer on there, on the head, then it would probably just mask over that and cover it up. That happens often if you have too steep a slope on the head, or when you're tying in the whip finish, if you're not careful and getting enough tension on each of the thread wraps that you're putting in. I seem to have one hackle barb that got away from me. Now I'm going to put some head cement on this. If you have a softer hen hackle or, softer hackle, even schlappen or something that's the right length, you can use that. You'll get the hackle collar here will be a little bit softer. This is, even though it is a hen neck, these hackles are just a little bit stiffer, but that's okay. It gives me a nice collar. It will stand out in the water and it will swim very well. So I'm going to come back in a minute and put some black lacquer on that head. Generally 2 coats of black lacquer, and that will smooth it off and give it a nice finished look. That is Ray Bergman's Indian Yellow. Don't know if you can get the very light brown floss anymore, or the pale yellow. Even some of the Pearsalls I haven't seen in those light colors, but you can always improvise something else. That is the Indian Yellow. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. But what's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.